All right, it's time to talk Michigan football on the Our Football Network for the OFN today. And today is Tuesday, just a couple of days before Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there. And when it's Thanksgiving, it's also time, and Michigan fans and Ohio State fans know this as the game. So it's an interesting way to celebrate Thanksgiving each year. And Aaron McMann, of course, if we're talking Michigan football, we're talking with Aaron McMann from MLive. How's it going, Aaron?
Hey, Greg, it's good. As I was telling you before we went live, this has probably been the wildest last, I don't know, 3 weeks of my career on this beat, and we've had some wild weeks. Between the Big Ten in 2020 and Jim Harbaugh debating whether he's going to leave the NFL. So it's been pretty wild, but good to be back with you.
Yeah, let's get right into it. So we haven't talked over the last few weeks, obviously. So let's try to get caught up and in the easiest, like, especially now that we are at the point we're at. So a lot has happened. So I'm sure there was a lot more speculation a few weeks ago, and now there's more fact. Not that everything is set in stone still. There's still a lot of questions on the horizon. Where does it stand right now?
Yeah, so it's a really big, convoluted story, but we'll try and boil it down as basic as I can for everyone. Michigan's football program is currently under an NCAA investigation right now for impermissible and in advanced scouting. The story has kind of grown, into this sign stealing scandal because the NCAA believes it has enough evidence linking Michigan to impermissible sign stealing. And folks who follow football, watch football, are in the industry, are pretty familiar with sign stealing. It's a pretty common occurrence. It happens regularly. There are guys on most staffs that their job is essentially break down film on a week-to-week basis and steal signs. But what the NCAA is basically alleging is Michigan went to kind of extraordinary means to do it. At this point, one staffer has been kind of linked to the whole thing by the name of Connor Stallions. Folks who have followed the story, I'm sure, are familiar with the name at this point. He has since resigned, but there have been investigations have uncovered him purchasing tickets to more than 30 college football games over the past 3 years, many of which involved future opponents of Michigan. He is alleged to have sent friends, associates, family members to games to literally film the sidelines to send the film back to him so he could decode signs. So that's kind of where things stand. The Big Ten decided to get involved a couple of weeks ago, and that's why Jim Harbaugh is currently facing the suspension that he is. That was a Big Ten decision. It was until the end of the regular season. At the point it came down, it was Michigan had 3 games remaining. So Saturday against Ohio State will be game number 3. And then presumably if nothing else comes up and there's no ruling from the NCAA at this point, Jim will be allowed to coach in a potential Big Ten title game and bowl game.
Okay, so he is definitely not coaching this week.
That is accurate. Yes, it will be Sharon Moore, Michigan's offensive line coach and offensive and coordinator.
Okay, and he's been coaching during the week.
So Jim is still allowed at practice. It's kind of like his suspension at the beginning of the season that Michigan handed down for a separate situation, where he's still allowed at practice on a day-to-day basis. He can still take part in team meetings. He just cannot be at the stadium on game day on Saturday.
Okay. As far as the situation with Harbaugh now, a lot of people are speculating that, all right, well, this is it. Why would he want to continuously go through this? He was that close to leaving as it was, and this has got to be the last straw. What is your feeling? What have you heard? What is your guess as far as whether or not you think Harbaugh is definitely going to leave, or that there's still a chance that he might stay?
It's a valid question to ask. It's a valid concern because it would not surprise me if Jim Harbaugh ends up leaving Michigan. Keep in mind he's only got 3 years left on his current contract. There have been discussions behind the scenes with Michigan and Harbaugh of potentially extending him. In fact, I've been told that Michigan does want to extend him. Problem is the optics right now don't look very good. When your coach has been suspended by the conference, the NCAA is investigating the program for
not a good time.
No, it's not. So you start to wonder if Jim is going to look elsewhere this offseason. And look, he has the last couple of years. I mean, he wanted the Minnesota Vikings job a couple of off seasons ago. He never got the offer. The Denver Broncos courted him last offseason. He ended up deciding to come back. So it's not like the NFL hasn't been a thing before. And I know you and I have discussed this before as well. Jim has said publicly that he wants to go back to the NFL. His ultimate goal at this point now is to win a Super Bowl. So it wouldn't shock me if 2 months from now we're talking about Jim Harbaugh, starting a new tenure in some NFL city. And again, there's also the unknown of the NCAA. As I mentioned, the NCAA is still investigating this. I don't think we're expecting a ruling anytime soon. Or it probably won't come as early as the spring. But if it does come next offseason, there's a good chance that Jim Harbaugh is handed another suspension. We don't know how long. We don't know what it would entail. But it's very possible he doesn't coach. If he were to come back to Michigan, he wouldn't coach the entirety of next season either.
Do you? I got to imagine a lot of Michigan fans must feel like Harbaugh's being picked on. Do you think that's accurate?
Yeah, it's definitely come up. Jim has been asked that question, and he has acknowledged he believes his program is has become a target. There's maybe a case to be made. Jim has thumbed his nose at the NCAA before. Remember when he first got the job at Michigan, in 2015, he started those satellite camps that kind of like you know, lived in the gray area of the NCAA rules. The NCAA had to enact a rule to kind of prevent that type of stuff. Opposing coaches in the SEC and even the Big Ten were up in arms at that point. Jim has come out in favor of revenue, sharing with players. He was one. He was one of the first coaches to kind of bring out the idea of one-time transfers for players. So he's definitely kind of bucked the whole conventional wisdom, during his Michigan tenure. I got to think that's ruffled some feathers. So you could certainly think that way. It's certainly possible. It goes back to like the crutch of this whole Michigan, the sign stealing stuff. If everyone does it, is it that big of a deal? I don't know. The problem with Michigan is you got caught. Like, right? It's like everyone speeds, but you're the one that got caught, and you're the one facing the consequences. So, I think if you're asked the Michigan players and Jim Harbaugh, yes, I would say that they would agree they're being targeted. But from someone from the outside, I always go back to this when I hear my friends that are Michigan fans. They always complain about the NCAA, the stuff that's going on. How would you feel if this was your rival school going through this? My guess would be most folks would call them guilty, would think they're
Sure.
cheaters, and want something done about it.
Yeah. It makes sense. I get it. And but most of this is not. So to clarify it, it is coming from the NCAA as opposed to the Big Ten. It's not like the Big Ten should have or would have any reason to pick on Jim Harbaugh with the amount of money that the program makes for the conference. So, has the Big Ten? Do you think they've done a good job backing Harbaugh up? The fans, how do they react, or how have they been reacting towards the way the Big Ten has come to Jim's defense?
Yeah, that's a different story here, and I'm glad you brought that up because that is where kind of things have splintered. That's where the Michigan administration, Jim Harbaugh, most folks associated with the Michigan football program haven't been happy with the way the Big Ten's handled this. They have thought from the get-go that this should be an NCAA situation. And really, the Big Ten suspension is kind of unprecedented because it's not like they haven't handed down punishments for stuff before, but it's usually within their purview, right? It's actions during games, it's comments said after during a press conference. It's not something of this magnitude where the NCAA has felt the need to come in and investigate. So that was what Michigan had a big issue with the last couple of weeks. It was one of the reasons why they threatened legal action in court that they later kind of pulled out of. So. They feel like they've been unfairly punished by the Big Ten. You can make the case that the first-year commissioner kind of was under pressure. There were reports a few weeks back that he had conference calls with the ADs and the football coaches, and they were all up in arms and they wanted something done, and they were pressuring him to punish Michigan. So, the Big Ten and Michigan's relationship right now could be, you could describe it as rocky. They're not happy, and it's not just athletic folks. It's really on down the line, the board of regents, the school administrators, everything else. So I'm really curious to see where it goes. The one thing that, as I mentioned, that Michigan and Harbaugh pulled out the court filing. And the Big Ten has basically admitted they've agreed to stop investigating. They've acknowledged that they won't punish Harbaugh any further.
Okay.
So right now, at this point, any further punishment will come from the Big Ten, or excuse me, the NCAA.
Okay.